This is what makes a Shay Locomotive special. I'm Darren, and this is the Industrial Revolution. So this is the Shay Locomotive here at the Hesston Steam Museum, and this is what got me to drive 3 hours each way today. I wanted to see this. I was hoping it was going to be running, but it's not today, but I did get a private tour back here from the executive director, so I can get a chance to see it. It runs on Labor Day weekend if you're in the area. So I'm really excited to see this, very different from any other steam locomotive you've ever seen. So this is one of this was the last narrow gauge Shay ever built.
Yeah, so Lima built 6 Shays after this. They were all standard gauge. This one was built as basically, it is a standard gauge locomotive in the sense that the superstructure, the frame, and everything is standard gauge spec size. So this one, and there's a museum in Illinois that has, Illinois Railway Museum has another Shay that was on the shop floor. I think it came out after this one. They were kind of sisters there in Lima. It's the same size. Just about the same boiler. I think there's some differences, but really how they got to the narrow gauge is obviously the distance between the wheels. Mm-hmm. Obviously that dictates your gauge, but also if you see, they could build the boiler, they could build everything to standard gauge spec, and then they just had a different manifold. So there's a manifold back there, and one is machined in, mm-hmm. and one is machined out. And so that leans, if you look at us, this is leaned in just a skosh. I don't know what the degrees are, but this engine is this marine engine is.
Yep, I see it just slightly in on the bottom.
Right.
Yep.
And then so at IRM, the Illinois Railway Museum, it's going to be leaned out, okay. And that aligns your drive shaft to compensate for the gauge. And so you can change that out, makes the engine more sellable. Mm-hmm. They could change that gauge with a different set of trucks and save the boiler and everything.
So what's the gauge on this one?
36. So this is a 3-foot gauge, narrow gauge Shay locomotive.
Lima Locomotive Works shipped this locomotive to the New Mexico Lumber Company in November 1929, right at the very beginning of the Great Depression. It was originally built to burn soft coal, but since one thing lumber companies always have in abundance is scrap wood, it was soon converted to run on wood. After a few years, the Great Depression left the New Mexico Lumber Company unable to make its payments, so the locomotive was repossessed and headed for scrap. This is a fate that it eventually get used to. In 1937, it was rescued and sold to the Oregon Lumber Company for use on their Sumter Valley Railroad. Today, the Sumter Valley Railroad is a tourist line, but back then it was a logging railroad. In Oregon, after it arrived, the Oregon Lumber Company decided to start using trucks to move logs instead of trains. It looked like the last job for Oregon Lumber Company number 7 was going to be the removal of its own tracks. It made its final trip back to the mill, where it was parked and abandoned for a second time. Well, Oregon gets pretty cold, and they realized they had this huge steam boiler sitting right there, not doing anything. It was rescued for a second time and relegated to providing steam heat, a fate that was shared by many semi-retired steam locomotives around the world. It was converted from wood to oil around this time as well. Eventually, the lumber mill shut down, and number 7 was, once again, abandoned and appeared destined for scrap. It sat until 1961 when it was sold to the Black Hills Central, which is a tourist railroad running out of Hill City, South Dakota. It ran there for a while before, in 1970, it moved here to the Hesston Steam Museum. It was rebuilt, reconfigured back to wood burning, and put into service pulling passenger trains. This lasted until May 26, 1985. I can't imagine what it was like coming in to see this. Number 7 had already escaped the scrapyard 3 times. 1985 was its 4th escape. Hesston Steam Museum rebuilt the roundhouse, rebuilt the number 7, and put it back into service, and it remains in service today. I miss seeing the number 7 run by only 2 weeks. If you've been watching this channel for long, though, you probably already know where I was 2 weeks later. So what actually makes the Shay special anyway? Well, they made Shays in both standard and narrow gauge. They really excelled as narrow gauge locomotives. Like all narrow gauge locomotives, they were great in tight spaces. Climbing along ledges cut into mountains, using temporary tracks laid down for logging work, and for tighter curves than standard gauge could handle, you just couldn't beat narrow gauge. On top of the usual narrow gauge advantages, though, Shays actually had a couple more. First, for their size, they had a lot of drivers. The larger ones, like Shay number 7 here, which is a Shay Class C, even had drivers under the tender, for a total of 12 36-inch drivers. That's a lot of tractive force for their size. The real difference, though, comes from the fact that it's a geared locomotive. Just looking at the front, you can see the first huge difference. The boiler is offset to the left from the engineer's point of view, leaving room for the vertical cylinders on the right. This also keeps the weight balanced on the locomotive, and, as an engineer, there's actually one further advantage.
Nice thing about this compared to other locomotives I've been in, I can see
Oh yeah. On this side,
on this side.
you can't see over the top.
Let's bring it over the others. Oh, well, it's because the window's dirty. And this side, you can see nothing.
Those prominent vertical cylinders are connected to a horizontal drive shaft, which runs the entire length of the locomotive and, in the case of the larger ones, also under the tender. Gearing along the drive shaft connects to every single wheel on the right-hand side of the locomotive and tender. This drives every single axle independently. On normal steam locomotives, those driver wheels are rigidly locked into place along the frame, severely limiting the turning radius. Some of the biggest steam locomotives used articulation to break the drivers into a couple sets, but with the huge diameter of the drivers, the turning radius was still severely limited. Shays get around that by using fairly standard trucks or bogies with 2 axles and 4 standard-sized wheels on each truck. Each truck is free to turn fully independently of the others, meaning they can handle just about any curve that the cars can handle. With a rigid drive shaft, though, that wouldn't help. To fix that, between each pair of trucks along the drive shaft, there's 2 additional components added. First is the universal joint. Those are the big vertical discs you see on the drive shaft. Universal joints allow the drive shaft to bend at that point while still spinning at the same speed along its full length. These types of joints are everywhere, and you may have even used them yourself. They're often used with drills and screwdrivers to get around corners. The second critical feature is called a prismatic joint. That's the big, square, blocky thing. This is the thing that really makes everything else work. These sliding square prismatic joints allow the smaller square shaft on the left to slide into the larger square hole on the right. That allows the length of each section of the drive shaft to vary as needed. Combined, the universal and prismatic joint between each set of trucks allows the drive shaft to bend and match the curve of the rails, and to bend very sharply if needed. The only real limit is that if you turn so sharp, if you push the prismatic joint in so far that it bottoms out, that's as much as you can turn. This didn't tend to be much of a problem. All these advantages do come with disadvantages though, which kept them from really seeing much long distance or mainline use. At a maximum operating pressure of 200 psi for this locomotive, the small drivers and losses due to gearing meant this locomotive was only able to go a maximum speed of 16.1 miles per hour. There aren't many places still running Shays today, which is unfortunate. These workhorses of the locomotive world went places that no other locomotive could go, and did things that no other locomotive could do. You'll find some sitting in museums, but finding one actually running, that's something special.
So all these vertical pistons, the geared drive, the sliding prismatic joint, the universal joints, all of those allowed for all of the advantages that the Shay locomotives had. And that's why this is the Industrial Revolution. Hey, somebody put oil on here.
There's a lot.
Who would have guessed? Hey, before you go, I do need your help to keep this channel growing. Easiest thing you can do is just like or subscribe to the video. That tells YouTube, hey, this channel is worth watching. They'll show it to more people. Other thing you can do, completely free, is just leave a comment. More than 2 or 3 words is all it takes, and that counts as YouTube interaction. That's the strongest signal you can send to YouTube to recommend a channel to other people. Beyond that, if you can help out, this channel is actually fairly expensive to run. I usually drive hour, 2 hours, 3 hours each way to get to these sites. So it can get pretty expensive. If you can help out with that, I have a Patreon page over at patreon.com/industrialrevolution. There's monthly memberships over there, or if you're interested in just a one-time contribution to help out, just hit the super thanks button on this video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you at the next one.